Are you thinking about selling your home in the Chicagoland area? Well, before we begin to pop the champagne and celebrate the win, let's talk numbers. Specifically, let's talk about closing costs. Because whereas you may be cashing out on the sale from the equity you've built on the property, there are specific things you have to pay for. And so in this video, I'll be breaking down what you can anticipate to pay in terms of closing costs as a seller when you sell your home. So if you're ready like I'm ready, let's dive in. Hello, my name is Nonya Ononobu. I am a licensed real estate agent in the Chicagoland area. I help buyers and sellers navigate real estate here in the city of Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. So if you have any questions about the process or would like more information, feel free to leave a comment in the um, below, right? Or you could check the description for my contact information. In addition to making any repairs or updates that are needed for your house and getting it ready for showings and just getting it ready in general for the market, a lot of people overlook and are actually blindsided by the closing costs associated with the transfer of ownership or the sale of your property to a potential buyer. And if you stay till the end, I'll show you an actual breakdown of potential property, just so that you can see what the actual numbers could look like. And of course, it's an estimate, right? But I will at least give you something to give you an idea of what to look for when you're looking to sell your property. The first closing cost item to think about is what we call transfer taxes. Think of your transfer taxes as the sales tax for the sale of your home. So, for example, when you go to the grocery store or any store in general, right, in Illinois, you pay for the items and then on the bottom of your receipt, you see the sales tax. So, same concept here. The transfer tax is based off of the sale price of your property. Illinois has one, it's 50 cents for every $500. On the county level, it is 25 cents for every $500. And then, depending on the municipality where you are, you may or may not have transfer taxes. So, for example, let's say the property is $500,000. So, 50 cents for every $500 comes out to about $500. And then 25 cents for every $500 comes out to 250. So with the state and county, you're looking at $750. On the municipality level, if you're in Chicago, for example, the seller's portion, because in Chicago it's split up into two, the buyer has one, the seller has one. The seller's portion is $1.50 for every $500. So that comes out to about $1,500. So if you're looking at a property in the city of Chicago, the transfer taxes on the seller's side alone are $2,250. Next thing we'll talk about is title insurance. And this is the insurance policy that you give to, as a seller, you give to the buyer, essentially warranting and guaranteeing that you are the rightful owner of the property and you have the rights to transfer ownership to them. And so in the future, if anyone comes to challenge their ownership, the insurance policy will take care of it. Right. So this is done through the title company and they purchase the policy on your behalf and for the buyer. And of course, they do all their checks before this is done, but this is just an additional assurance to this buyer that you own the property and you can transfer it over to them. You can transfer ownership over to them. The cost of it will vary based on the price of the property, but you're looking at somewhere from about 1,000 plus, and then it kind of goes up from there depending on the price of the property. A third one to think about is attorney fees. While working with an attorney is not mandatory, in my part of the Chicagoland area, we do work with attorneys. They work in tandem with the title company. And so they verify the documents, prepare the deed, and all of those things for the buyer. All right. And you as well, help making sure that anything that needs to be done legally on your part is done so that when you transfer ownership, you're doing it the right way. Of course, like the transfer taxes and things like that, you may not have known about them, but that's all part of the process of making sure that you do what you're supposed to do. If your property is in a condominium, for example, Illinois has a condominium act, so they're making sure that whatever is required through that is done, all right, for you, through part of the process. So a lot of those things are handled by the attorneys here in my part of Illinois. And then they help you up until the time of closing. And their fees again vary based on the attorney that you're working with, anywhere from 500 and just goes up from there. If your property is an investment property with tenants, leases, things like that, the fees may vary. If it's a more complex sale, there might be an add-on fee to their normal charges. So it just depends. So that's where you would work with your attorney to figure out the cost. But you could just on the ballpark think about it like 500 to $1,000, give or take, depending on your property and your needs. The fourth thing to consider would be property taxes. They will be prorated to the day of closing. And what I mean by that is in Illinois, we pay our taxes in arrears. So I'm recording this towards the end of May 2025. And right now we're paying 2024 taxes. And so you haven't paid the taxes from January 1st till May 2025. And so part of what will happen when the attorney and title company are preparing the closing statement, they will factor any unpaid taxes for the seller, and that will be a debit. That will be part of your closing cost as a seller. So if you haven't finished paying your 2024 second installment taxes, then you would, pay that first, and then they will add on the 2025 portion, and it's prorated and calculated based off the 2024 numbers, right? So they would figure all of that out, and that would be part of your closing costs. For example, let's just say that your taxes are $2,400 and we're closing on June 30th. They will figure that 1,200 is your portion for January 1st to June 30th. And so as part of your closing costs, they would deduct $1,200 as a debit, and then that would be a credit to the buyer so that when the tax bill comes in 2026, the buyer already has your share and they could use that money to pay the taxes for the property. Our fifth one would be real estate agents compensation. Traditionally, sellers work with real estate agents. And so if you're working with a licensed real estate agent, there will be a compensation for the listing agent that you work with. And you may also compensate the buyer's agent as well in that transaction. Whatever you negotiate as part of the transaction with the seller, with your agent, the seller's agent, and also the buyer's agent, that would also be part of your closing costs. Now, fees range anywhere. You could look it up. There are no standard fees, and so you can look it up and see what the going rate is in your area, perhaps, and then discuss that with the agent that you're working with. The next cost would be for a survey. Now, the lender or your buyer may request a survey of the property. And so a survey would have to be done by a licensed surveyor. And these can range from $500, $600. Customarily, where I work in Illinois, the seller's attorney, so your attorney that you're working with, will help coordinate that on your behalf. Reach out to a surveyor. They will set up a schedule, come survey the land, and then provide the survey document that the buyer will receive at closing. Now, the last one here is just miscellaneous fees. So miscellaneous fees can range anywhere from recording fees, because like recording the transaction or the transfer of ownership with the county. It could also include any homeowner association fees that may be involved in your closing. It may include any closing costs that you agree to compensate the buyer, or repair costs that you agree to compensate the buyer, home warranty if you're providing one. Maybe you hired a stager and they get paid at closing. Whatever it is, right? If there are any additional fees, then you can kind of add them on at this point. And all these fees that I've mentioned so far will kind of add up to your closing costs. All right. So property taxes, transfer taxes, realtor commissions, attorney fees, any fees from the government, right? Transfer taxes or municipality taxes, and all of those things, title fees as well, will all be included as part of your closing costs. So I'm going to show you an example of one real quick so that you just have an idea of what it could look like for in your situation. So I have the property chosen, and I'm going to say it's a conventional loan transaction. And my price is for this property, I'm just going to pick $380,000. And this app kind of defaults to these numbers. So I'm just going to leave it as is. And when you're working on your property, it will be more specific. Seller concession. So if you're contributing to any closing costs, those will go here. If you're helping make any repairs, those will go here. Miscellaneous. So this is where like staging fees would come in. If maybe you were going to pay a contractor at the end and their fee is part of the closing cost, then it would go here. I'm just going to put attorney in here as one. And earlier I said it's anywhere from 500 to 1,000. So I'm just going to kind of go in the middle and do 750 and click done. So it's going to show up as part of my closing costs. It pulled up the taxes for this property. I'm saying that we don't have a loan on the property, so that would be 0. If you have a loan, it's better that you do that at the end versus putting it in here, unless you know the actual payoff amount. All right. So we'll just leave that for now. Now the city transfer taxes. This is where, let's say this property is in Chicago. So I'm going to look for Chicago here. I'm going to pick the one for the seller. Because remember I told you in Chicago there's one for the seller, there's one for the buyer. And so this app is very helpful because then it helps us realize where we are. Actually, the property I'm using here is in Niles. So I'm going to pick Niles and see what it is. So it's $3 for every $1,000 and it's paid by the buyer. Okay, so Niles is paid by the buyer. So we're going to not have that as part of our closing costs. And then we would put our closing date as the end of June, just so that it's kind of in the middle. Right, and I'm actually going to remove the transfer taxes from here just because this property is in Niles. And we're going to compute. Okay. And for a property that's $380,000, this is what you anticipate as a closing cost, and this would be the net to the seller at closing. And this little thing here kind of helps us when we're working with clients to say, okay, if it's sold for more, what would it be? If it's sold for less, what would it be? So I use this too with my clients. And then finally, if I click here on detailed closing costs, it gives me a breakdown. So this is what the title policy is, the title insurance I told you about, and these are some other title fees that are associated with this transaction. So you're looking at title is about give or take 3,000-ish. Okay. And then other fees. This is our transfer taxes I mentioned from the state, the county, a survey, recording fees and attorney fees and all of the fees and realtor fees and such. Okay. And you can edit here if you know that any of these numbers will be different. You could actually make the changes here. Maybe the buyer is paying your taxes, your transfer taxes, or you're splitting them based on the agreement you guys have, right? Whatever it is, you can make those changes here to give you an idea of what your closing costs would be. And once you hit done, I'm just going to select for this one only, so it doesn't change my settings. Okay, and I didn't make any changes, so the numbers are still the same. All right, and then we can, share this with our clients and make it a PDF and all of those good things. Okay. All right, so that was it. That was just an example of what it could look like with closing costs. And of course, the numbers will be different. This is just an estimate. It could be different based on your taxes, based on when you're closing with the prorations, and whatever else that is involved in your specific transaction. And so if you need something like this, you're thinking about purchasing, feel free to reach out and we will be glad to assist you with trying to figure out what your proceeds will look like if you sold your property. And if you have any questions about buying or selling real estate here in the Chicagoland area, my team and I will be glad to assist you with the process. Our information is in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.